333 BCE, the Mediterranean sun beats down on a narrow stretch of land. Mountains rise sharply on one side, the sea crashes on the other. There's nowhere to run. Ahead, the army of Persia waits, led by Darius III himself, their numbers vast and intimidating, ready to crush anything in their path. Alexander commands barely 37,000 men, exhausted after weeks of hard marching, badly outnumbered. Darius believes he has trapped him. The Persian king thinks the war is about to end, that the Macedonian army has been cut off and cornered. By every rule of ancient warfare, he is right. But Issus is not the battle Darius thinks he is fighting. Within hours, everything the Persians believed about this battle will be wrong. For the first time in Persian history, the King of Kings will abandon the battlefield while the fighting is still undecided. Alexander will not destroy an empire that day, but he will shatter the authority that holds it together. How did an army that should not have survived force the most powerful ruler on earth to turn and flee in the middle of battle? By the end of this story, you will see how a battle that should have been lost redefined what power meant in the ancient world. Issus did not begin on the battlefield. It started a year earlier. Alexander had crossed into Asia and smashed Persian forces at the Granicus River. Then he did something unexpected. Instead of marching inland toward the Persian heartland, he turned south, seizing ports, cities, and coastlines, not to conquer land, but to destroy Persian naval power. City by city, the coastline fell. The Persian fleet was slowly strangled. Persia did not sit idle. After the shock of Granicus, the empire adapted. Darius placed the war in the hands of one of the few men who understood how dangerous Alexander was and how he had to be fought. Memnon of Rhodes, a Greek mercenary commander in Persian service. Experienced, methodical, dangerous. Memnon avoided direct battle. Instead, he opened a second front. Persian fleets surged back into the Aegean. Islands fell into Persian hands. Greek cities began to waver. Rebellions stirred behind Alexander's lines. For the first time, the invasion was genuinely endangered. Not by armies in front of him, but by collapse at home. Alexander was overextended, far from Greece, with no navy and no margin for error. Then, without warning, the war changed, not through battle, but through chance. Memnon fell ill and died. Historians would later argue about what this meant: luck, fate, or simply the randomness that governs war. Whatever it was, Alexander was spared the fight he might not have survived. The Persian counteroffensive lost its architect, and with him its momentum. Now the war stopped drifting and started moving toward collision. While Alexander advanced further into Asia, the response came from the heart of the empire. In Susa, Darius III ordered a royal army assembled, not a satrapal force, not a proxy war. An army drawn from across Asia, tens of thousands, cavalry, infantry, the full weight of imperial power. For the first time, the great king would lead in person. Darius marched west with his court, his treasury, and his family, traveling with the army. This was not just a campaign, it was a display of authority in motion. Both armies moved toward Syria, each believing they were forcing the other into a trap. Alexander reached Issus first. The city fell quickly, and before marching south, he left behind his wounded, men too sick or injured to continue. Then Darius made his move. He marched north through the mountain passes, slipped behind the Macedonian army, and seized Issus itself. What he found there was not a garrison, but Alexander's wounded. They were executed. When the news reached Alexander, everything changed. The Persian king was no longer ahead of him, he was behind. That night, Alexander gathered his commanders. There was no speech meant to inspire, only certainty. They would turn back. They would march through the darkness. They would take the pass before dawn. The army moved at night. Torches kept low. Orders whispered. By midnight, they reached the heights again. Sentries were posted along the rocks. The army rested in silence, waiting for light. At dawn, the darkness lifted. Below lay a narrow plain and the Persian army waiting. There was no room for hesitation. This was not a battlefield chosen by either king. It was a narrow coastal plain. The sea pressed in from the west. Mountains rose hard and steep to the east. Between them ran a shallow river, the Pinarus. Here, space vanished. Persia's greatest strength, its numbers, had nowhere to go. Cavalry could not sweep wide. Formations could not expand. An army built to overwhelm was forced to compress. Alexander saw it immediately. This land did not reward size, it rewarded control, timing, and nerve. Both armies arrived believing there would be no second chance. Darius deployed first. At the center, he placed himself in the royal chariot, guarded by the immortals, with Greek mercenaries packed tightly along the riverbank. Infantry filled the narrow plain behind them, rank upon rank, compressed by terrain. Persian archers massed in the rear. Cavalry crowded the shoreline near the sea, the only open ground wide enough to charge, Alexander answered with precision. The center of his battle line was formed by heavy infantry armed with long sarissa pikes. Cavalry was placed on the far ends of both flanks. Thessalian units on the left, and elite companion cavalry directly under Alexander on the right. On the far left, Parmenion took command. Both armies stood ready. The plain went silent. The fighting began on the Persian right. Cavalry surged forward, wave after wave, driving hard along the shoreline toward Parmenion's flank. Parmenion did not wait. He ordered a countercharge. Both cavalries crashed together near the sea, horses colliding, ranks breaking, men thrown from the saddle. The pressure was immense. The Macedonian left bent but held. At the same moment, the center moved. Alexander ordered the phalanx forward. They descended into the river, climbed the far bank, and were met by arrows. They kept coming. Shields locked. Sarissas drove ahead. Seeing the moment, Darius gave the order. The Persian infantry surged forward, thousands at once, pressing down toward the phalanx in a crushing countercharge. The fighting turned brutal. Bodies collided, spears shattered. Under the weight of the assault, the Macedonian center faltered. Then Alexander moved. On the right, he gave the signal. The companions surged forward as one. They plunged across the Pinarus straight into the Persian left. The impact was immediate. The first Persian line buckled, shields split, formations tore apart. There was no pause. The charge kept going. Alexander drove through the broken front into the second line before it could stabilize. The Persian left staggered, then collapsed. What was meant to hold the flank became a breach, and through it, Alexander kept pushing. On the Macedonian left, Parmenion was in trouble. Persian cavalry pressed in from every side, numbers without end, horses crashing forward. Parmenion's flank began to give ground, slowly, stubbornly, fighting not to win, but to survive. At the same moment, the center buckled. The Macedonian phalanx was engaged frontally, pressed hard by elite Persian infantry. The immortals advanced in disciplined ranks, shields locked, spears driving forward. This was what they were built for. Sarissas struggled to find space. Momentum bled away. Step by step, the pressure mounted. The Macedonian center held only by effort. Alexander did not stop. After shattering the Persian left, he wheeled inward, hard and fast, not toward glory, but necessity. The Macedonian center was buckling. Companions and hypastists slammed into the Persian center from flank and rear, cutting into packed infantry that never saw the turn coming. Men were crushed where they stood. The pressure broke the Persian center open, and only then, through dust, bodies, and collapsing ranks, Alexander saw him, the royal chariot, the standard. He gathered what remained of his cavalry and drove straight at the heart of it. Darius hesitated. Then the King of Kings turned and fled. With him, the battle unraveled. Everything followed. The cavalry near Parmenion broke. The center dissolved. Men who had not been defeated began to run, not because they had lost the battle, but because they had lost the king. Alexander pursued 25 miles until night ended the chase. The king escaped, but everything else remained. When Alexander returned, he found the royal camp intact. Gold, silver, treasures beyond counting. Also present were members of Darius's family, his wife, his mother, his daughters. He treated the captured women with respect, not as spoils, but as royalty. He surveyed it all, then turned to his friends. This, it would seem, is to be a king. This restraint signaled something new, not just conquest, but legitimacy. Issus did not end Persian resistance. Darius still lived. The empire's heart still beat, but its center had been broken. The King of Kings had fled his own battlefield, and everyone saw it. Then Alexander turned south toward Tyre, an island fortress unconquered for centuries. He would lay siege for 7 months, build what should be impossible, and break a city that believed it could never fall. Issus had already changed the rules of war. A smaller, disciplined army proved that timing, courage, and leadership mattered more than numbers. This was the moment Alexander became a legend. The battle that should have been lost became the story of a lifetime. History would never forget it.